Hey, what up? We're gonna try one take supplemental to today's practice. We kind of ran out of time. This is just basics for Odaiko form. So let's start. I'll start with that, and then I'll give you some maybe exercises to kind of work on this week. So first of all, I'm talking about stance. I'm gonna go to my slides. So a position where your center of gravity is kind of directly under a straight spine is kind of like a good starting place, right? It's a very comfortable stance. You'll see people use different types of stances. For instance, like with your back that has more of an arc to it, and maybe even like your shoulders kind of give kind of this upward motion, right? So this is kind of a very kind of powerful stance with your center of gravity behind you a bit. So you'll see this a lot. It's probably more common than even, a kind of a form where you're kind of lean forward into the drum. This can be used to kind of moments of kind of dramatic tension or like kind of a quiet part with the drum, particularly if you're playing kind of fast tsuku, right? So in terms of like where our center of gravity, where our body should be, like I do want to kind of open up to say that it kind of depends on how you're playing, right? But like we are gonna like I want you all to start, particularly if you're just learning Odaiko, with a very stable stance, center of gravity underneath you, okay? So it's feet a little bit more than shoulder width apart. It might depend on the height of the drum, but it should be really comfortable, and it should be like stable, right? And that's kind of what I mean, that the energy kind of, you can feel this energy kind of in your legs, connecting them together. It's subtle, but like when you feel the arc of your legs versus like if you're just flat on your feet, kind of sitting, right? If you can kind of feel them supporting you with energy, that's kind of a cool place to be, I think, for this. Do you need to have your back leg super far back? It kind of depends on if you need to get lower, right? If your back is facing the audience, it looks cooler to spread that out wider, right? Have a big stable base. If I'm sideways to the audience though, I might want to take that step further back, right? That I have like a longer kind of profile hitting the drum versus if I was in my wide stance from a side profile, maybe it doesn't look as cool as if I put that leg back, right? So, it can be kind of variable and kind of depending on what you're trying to convey with your relationship to the drum. And so I kind of mentioned to you in practice today that the first thing I think you should kind of focus on terms of the aesthetics of the Odaiko is this relationship between you and the drum, and that's powerful, right? Like how your body relates to the drum is going to convey so much on stage, more so at this point than any kind of twirling you do or flair is. I think I would say for Odaiko, like just like a strong fundamental is it's just cool by itself, right? So we'll build that, and then I don't want to say you can't do other stuff with it too, but we need to have that base. Right? Like a sloppy Odaiko is just not fun, right? It doesn't add to a set, right? Odaiko needs to be kind of really grounded, okay? So, so that's kind of stance side. So for you practicing at home, right, without much, to go off of, right? You can practice in, if you like your leg back or more to the side, or even like, I want to stress that it doesn't necessarily have to be as diagonal. Like a stance that's, just maybe a little bit out of horse stance, even just like a step, right? That's kind of a nice starting place. Okay, so here we are with our stance. I didn't really, we ran out of time, I'm really sorry, but like to go over grip, particularly for people who haven't really hit before. Well, first, it's not much different than what you're used to on beta, particularly with like the back loaded grip, right? That fulcrum, like the further back it is, like the more power we're gonna get out of these hits, right? And if it's kind of further up in the hand, right, that might be used for kind of smaller kind of hits. You also could be kind of squeezing with these back ones around the fulcrum up top, right? If like particularly for kind of more narrow work, I guess. Like there's an interplay of how you're switching this grip up that can add a lot to a hit, I guess. I mean, like there's a lot of nuance, and your grip changing is actually doing a lot, I think, when you're playing Odaiko. For now, as we're just getting started, I want us to like drill that fundamental hit though that has the back weighted, that back fulcrum grip, all right? So that when it's as it snaps forward, it's snapping over just kind of the back fingers more so than the front. Now, this could be a bit difficult as you kind of imagine a drum, right? Like with a real drum, you know, I get that rebound, I hit, and then that's when my middle and my forefingers they come into play, and their job they reset the bachi. Without that actual feedback, like it might be a little weird just keeping it in the back grip, but I just want you to think about that as we're kind of going through, and maybe you're even letting them, like the top fingers, take control as you kind of hit your imaginary drum. So I guess, speaking of your imaginary drum, I think it would be good for you to visualize in space where that is as you set your stance. If you can practice right now your intentionality, knowing where that drum is, even though it's like a ghost, right? It doesn't exist. If I know in my heart kind of where it is, right? That's what I'm like measuring my body to, right? That's how I'm like relating to the space. So like not just swinging wildly into space, but to see it in your mind's eye and to try to connect with it, right? That's, I think, the best way we can do this kind of mental visualization training, right? I don't think it's gonna happen easy, right? Like it'd be so much easier to hit the drums. But I think maybe we take the what we can out of this time, and if we can focus on that intentionality of hitting, right? That's something that starts inside you, maybe that's something we can get out of it, okay? So that's our grip, that's our stance, our swing, our motion, right? We're gonna, for right now, we're just redoing kind of our big hits, okay? Our don and kon. So part of this is letting your arm be loose, letting it kind of fall back into place, and letting that wrist kind of be loose, right? So the bachi does fall back. That's kind of a question we got today. Like, should I scratch my back with the bachi? I would say no, not like this. If you're trying to intentionally hit something back here, right? You're kind of taking away from the fluidity of the motion, what gives you the kind of that power. But I think instead of thinking about it, like, should this come back or not? I think, like, what is natural with a backstroke, right? That it does come back, but it's not because I'm forcing it back. It comes back because it has weight, it has mass, and it's following just the backwards motion of my arm. To make this hit, so without any like lower body, with like a really stiff like shoulders too, this becomes like really kind of uncomfortable and like not very dynamic. So I think like the first thing we can kind of add is to let these rotator cuffs be free. Like the human body has so many dimensions it can move on. We're really not just wire frames with joints like the scapula, for instance, right? It articulates with your clavicle, right? The small little bone up here, and then you have a ball and socket joint with the humerus. And like other than that, it's a bunch of muscle. It has so much way that it can move. It's really amazing the kind of motion you can get out of your rotator cuff, right? So to relax that a bit, right? And see how I can get more motion than if I'm stiff, right? If I'm gripping too hard, if I'm really stiff, that's gonna be like not good looking Odaiko. But if I can like let that those degrees of motion kind of like there's stuff going on in here, right? And I think we want to avoid this kind of sideways lateral stuff, but even you can see my bachi stays in plane, right? I'm not really breaking plane. I perhaps at the very back, like I might be a little bit, but you can see this is generally in plane, but see, there's more going on here, right? There's a little bit of a twist in the core. This is allowing this rotator cuff to come out a bit, right? So all these little motions together will make like a good Odaiko hit. We talked a little bit in practice today about like when you're aiming at an Odaiko, like at least be aiming like perpendicular to the ground, or sorry, parallel to the ground. We don't want to be aiming down into it. Like that, we really want to kind of avoid just defaulting to kind of a beta kind of, or like hitting down. Occasionally you might, like in an intense part of your solo, maybe that's when you lean forward a bit and you kind of are, maybe have a bit of a downward vector, but generally let's try to keep I'm throwing it forward and even sometimes slightly up. I'm throwing it, my vector is even maybe above parallel, okay? So these hits should be kind of like if they should be loose, that if I were to just let go at the end of it, this would just spin end over end, like a, I don't know, like throwing a stick or something. Well, that's kind of what it is. Okay, so yeah, it's just trying to get loose with this motion. Like first of all, like this is this type of visualization you can do and you can practice by yourself, right? What other parts of my body are moving, right? You can, I say just think about this as you kind of learn at this stage. Like there's other ways you can get that motion. I've seen really good Odaiko players put a lot of hip into their movement, right? Now I think it really depends on the piece and what you're trying to convey, right? But maybe just consider the other ways you can add your body into this kind of this drivetrain, this big whip, right? Last thing I'll say about the striking is I think this is very easy to do, where you kind of go through the motions, but you're really only hitting from your wrist. Like you're really just essentially doing kind of this. You're just doing the motion and then stopping and hitting. Right? This is really kind of common, I think, first like attempts at Odaiko. I think the trick is, really making sure that you're using this full motion, right? I've come back here. From here, how do I transfer this potential energy into the drum, right? Yeah, and so maybe you want to be swinging from all the way back. Whether or not you kind of visualize like this as your starting spot with like kind of a throw, or if you kind of think of this as your start into it, right? I guess it kind of depends on you and your body and kind of how you think about it, but like you are throwing from all the way back, not just moving it here into this space to hit with your wrist. You're actually hitting with that full body. That hit starts in the ground, actually, right? So if you can imagine the energy coursing through you from the ground through your body up into my bachi, and kind of the whole drivetrain starts not just at my shoulders, it actually starts like deep in the ground. And that's, I think, when we can kind of visualize and enact that, that's going to be fun, like Odaiko playing. So there's some tips on form for now to get us started. I'm going to end with like some exercises that I think you should be doing to play Odaiko. This is kind of a really simple set of exercises. You kind of first set is just arm lifts with Odaiko bachi or with something kind of similar. You're just taking it from your thighs, kind of where your arms naturally rest by your legs, to at least 90 degrees, or honestly, you can get it a bit more than that. And this is kind of good in strengthening those shoulder muscles and kind of getting loose with that rotator cuff. We're going to do more too. But how many of these to do? I mean, you could start in doing kind of 20 reps or something. Eventually, I think you should be able to do like 100 of these, right? And then switching to kind of our next one or more, right? But I think a good thing to just start with is like do 100 of these guys. Switch to, I'm gonna just like my ceiling, take a knee. I'm going to do ones where I let the bachi fall all the way back, just really loose all the way back, and then take it to a vertical upright position, right? So I think this is nice in terms of just getting that back part of the swing kind of relaxed, right? That it's not something super stiff back here, it's really just part of a motion that comes forward, right? So maybe it doesn't have to touch your back, but you're letting the bachi come down and swinging it up. It's letting that wrist be loose as you chuck this upwards, okay? So you can do 100 of these, or however many like you want to structure your sets. And then we'll do the last one. This one is mainly focused more on that rotator cuff. You're taking it from your hands are supinated. It's, I guess, the anatomical term, but they're out, palm up, and then you're going to bring them over and across to palm down, as they kind of you can just have them kind of pass each other, or you can even just, they don't pass each other, just let it twist up here, I guess. And you can kind of give this, I think, for a good stretch, like let it come back instead of just to the side, right? Like let it stretch that rotator cuff, let it come all the way back, right? And it also kind of gives you a little, just kind of fun, also just manipulating the bachi as it makes that kind of circle too, right? Just get your hands warm up too, right? So yeah, so you could break these up into like, you know, like 20 of these, and then, you know, like 20 of these or something, and then these guys, and then do that over and over, kind of. But like, I think this is a great way to just build up those muscles and get loose with those kind of dimensions of motion that you'll use in Odaiko. I think that's all I have for this supplementary. So keep it up, and we'll get to it some more next week. Goodbye.